Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining the webinar. We'll just give it another minute for people to gather, and then we will kickstart. So grab a spot of lunch and a glass of water, and we'll be up and running in a minute. Okay, I'm going to make a start. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking the time to attend the webinar session today. Co-partnered between Woodhurst and docStribute. What we'll be talking through today is the AI journey and how building societies can take the next step towards innovation and making the most of AI. Now, artificial intelligence is something that's been heavily in the public domain and heavily in the newspapers over the last 18 months or so. But really, artificial intelligence has been involved in the financial services technology landscape for quite some time. It's not just a recent and new innovation. We can go back to the 1990s where algorithmic trading began using statistical models and early machine learning algorithms to predict trends and automate trading. In the early 2000s, we had the rise of predictive modeling in credit risk and fraud detection. This used techniques such as linear regression and decision trees to identify patterns in historical data to help firms make better data-driven decisions on a large scale. If we fast forward through to the 2010s, we had big data and advanced machine learning. More advanced techniques started to be adopted, such as neural networks and ensemble learning methods, and machine learning helped improve credit scoring and fraud detection by analyzing complex data relationships and identifying subtle fraud patterns. This also coincided with the rise of RegTech, helping companies comply with regulations and more efficiently using AI. Some of the examples of these RegTech companies could be Comply Advantage and Enigma, which are probably companies which you've heard of within the market. That brings us on to 2020s, which is where a lot more people associate the advancements of AI. And this is the era of deep learning, natural language processing, and conversational AI. These techniques allow for vast amounts of structured and unstructured data to be analyzed and processed. And with the rise of generative AI in the past 18 months, there are many applications across financial services. The big challenge at the moment is really in ensuring your organization is ready to adopt AI solutions and is fit for purpose to make the most out of them. And the secondary challenge is around convincing the regulator that the solutions are accurate, reliable, secure, and integrated. So hopefully that gives just a flavor of the fact that AI isn't just a new innovation in the last 18 months. There's been a lot of use cases and examples across financial services since even pre-2000. So today we've got a really exciting agenda to take you through. We'll kick off with some presentations from industry experts. We'll then hold a panel discussion around the use and adoption of AI within building societies specifically. And as we go through, please feel free to ask any questions using the Q&A functionality on Teams. We'll leave a bit of time at the end for any questions that come up. So without further ado, I want to pass over to each of the speakers on today's session just to give a brief introduction to themselves. I'm Luke Casey. I'm one of the co-founders of Woodhurst, who are a digital transformation consultancy doing a lot of work with mutuals around their transformation journey and modernization of their technology stack. Sam, can I hand over to yourself to give a quick introduction?
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Oh, sorry, two Sams.
Oh, sorry.
Go on, Sam Spacey. You go.
So sorry. Yeah. So I'm Sam. I'm an AI and data specialist at Woodhurst. I've got experience in building and delivering both data modernization and more recently AI programs to clients in the financial services sector. At Woodhurst, we've been creating products internally to help with internal functions and externally to help deliver some of these AI-based propositions to our clients.
Perfect. And Chris?
Yeah, hi, my name is Chris Ansara. I'm a CEO and founder at docStribute. At docStribute, our focus is really to improve the engagement, readership, and ultimately the understanding of regulated documents. And we see document distribution as a huge opportunity to engage with customers. You receive hundreds of documents from your financial service providers on a regular basis. And essentially we're using AI to help with that understanding component of the documents themselves, and obviously very excited to be here with you all today to explain how we're doing that. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks. And Sameer?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So I am Sameer Rahman, two hats on for today. I sit on the board of the Bath Building Society, have been there for about 2.5 years. So I'll give you my take on the adoption and evolution of AI within Bath Building Society and the Building Society in general. And my day job is I lead a data and AI consultancy called Data Money. So I've got quite a few other aspects and other kind of insights in general industry across AI as well. So yeah, look forward to this webinar. Thank you.
Brilliant. And last but not least, Sam?
Yeah, thanks, Luke. So Sam Sparks. I head up the BI analytics and strategy team at Shawbrook. So not a building society, but specialist lender. But the guys invited me here today to talk a little bit about our AI journey, how we're thinking about it, and how we're foreseeing the future.
Perfect. And that leads us quite nicely onto the first topic of conversation, which is from Sam around how Shawbrook set themselves up for success with AI. And I think this is quite pertinent for a lot of the mutuals because Shawbrook have done quite a lot in this space and are actually, for my mind, one of the early adopters of some of the more recent AI innovations. So we're hoping it will be really interesting for all of you to hear some of the tips and tricks which Sam has been through in the last couple of years on Shawbrook's AI journey, and hopefully there'll be some learnings which you can all take into your own organization's AI journey.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. So, like you said earlier, AI isn't necessarily new. It's been around for 25, 30 years in kind of a commercial sense. I guess what's changed recently is the availability and the cost of using this stuff. So I'll talk a little bit through how we kind of transition from kind of traditional AI, as I would call it. So at Shawbrook, so for those who don't know, we're a specialist lender. We have quite a sizable mortgage business. Plus, we do kind of specialist lending across a variety of products to kind of small, medium enterprise. We brand ourselves kind of best of both. So a strong kind of technical footprint, partnered with specialist knowledge, either at specific customer or product-based level. So, like I say, we've been doing the traditional AI, and what I mean by that is, I won't go too technical, but more commonly referred to as machine learning. So we've been doing that for a while at the bank, particularly in the credit space, as I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to, around kind of forecasting customer credit or book movements or areas like that, either kind of in-house, usually through a third-party software rather than anything kind of proprietary, or we're making use of partners to do that. But within the kind of last 2 years, as we've seen the shift in the AI space, particularly kind of the availability of some of these large language models, as we call them, the chat GPTs and so on, the emergence of OpenAI and equivalent, we start kind of shifting that focus a little bit of how we can kind of really fast forward the adoption in some of this AI capability. So that isn't that we've spent or thrown silly money at it at all, but we also haven't been standing still. And for I think this market more than anything is just on a kind of exponential growth curve and forever changing. So it is difficult to stay abreast of everything going on, but like I say, we found some relatively good starting points and have an idea of where we want to take it. So this is what I'm trying to show on the slide here. Okay, so how did we begin kind of transitioning from a, you know, relatively small traditional AI piece to kind of a core product offering at Shawbrook? So, you know, I think we concentrated on use cases that made sense. And we think of that in kind of three pots in terms of how we build that capability. We kind of have a tier of self-service. So we made use of a lot of kind of off-the-shelf Copilot tooling. So Microsoft Copilot, for example, is quite heavily used at Shawbrook. We then kind of build out a middle tier of kind of internal capabilities. So that's not just tech or skills. We did onboard data scientists and an AI engineer, but you know, only 3 or 4, and then partnered them with some of the existing skills we already have, and I'll come back to that bit in a minute. And then we still left, you know, the kind of the top of that pillar, who are our partners or niche third-party software providers that, you know, are just areas we don't want to go into, or it's just, you know, it doesn't make sense to. So we kind of have a degree of all three now. And like I say, for that self-service, you can go after those kind of quick win productivity gains quite quickly. So, you know, if any of you have used ChatGPT or if you've got the Microsoft Copilot, really, I'm going to simplify it. You know, those tools are great at reading and writing. Yeah, who would have thought that was such a need of skill at the moment? But you know, at a low level, they are fantastic at doing that. So whether that's summarizing emails, you know, summarizing meeting minutes, etc., there's loads of really easy adoption quick wins as part of that. You know, how you build a use case about that, I think we'll come back to later, but that aggregates up, right? If we scaled it out here, we've probably got 350, 400 colleagues using that tool now. And there is a bit of a change curve to that, you know, a natural change curve, particularly as, you know, you've got to understand the importance of asking the right questions. But that's moved relatively quickly and very well. We're now thinking of how we kind of move into that embedding stage, I would say. So, you know, we understand what this technology is good at, and also what it's not good at. But now we want to shift it and really point it to our kind of core capabilities to help us kind of differentiate our product offering to our competitors. So as a specialist lender, as you can imagine, that's really our origination process, our credit assessment process, and also our kind of portfolio management. So we're really starting to look how we embed particularly Gen AI capabilities, but coupled with those more traditional AI ones as well. So things we're looking at there is, again, productivity pieces. So we produce a lot of internal papers. The guys read a lot of kind of PDFs, emails through customer interactions. We don't have a huge CRM system here, for example. So a lot of the data we need to make a decision isn't on a system. A lot of this capability is very good at doing that. So we're looking at how we can, you know, not only help the guys produce content, but also start aiding better decisions around that content too. So, and that's not to say we're going to use AI to auto-generate decisions or auto-decide anything. For deals we want to do, a human's still going to be involved at every step of the path, and is going to read every sentence of that pack. I think the way we're thinking a bit more is how we can free up those times by making the decisions on the deals we don't want to do quicker. Okay, yeah, so how can we do a quicker validation or assessment of deals that are coming in against, you know, internal criteria or product criteria, lending criteria, etc. Okay, so that's how we're starting to think how we can take our foundational AI capability and kind of embedding it into the organization to really differentiate us on the market. And I guess quickly to talk through some of the challenges of moving from 1 to 2. Obviously, there's the technical side. As you know, a lot of these tools are relatively available, relatively cheap to use. But there is kind of that traditional change management element to still get over. I think Luke alluded to, you know, very media-led technology at the moment. There's discount. You know, if I had £1 every time I was asked whether my AI was going to hallucinate, I could probably have today off, that's for sure. But you know, a lot of lack of understanding around what the capability can and can't do. So we did a big comms piece as part of that, kind of not necessarily reassuring anyone, but really just giving a kind of comfortable level of what we might mean by it, how we're positioning it at Shawbrook, the areas we want to concentrate on and the areas we're not. So we're staying away from a lot of external customer-based stuff for the time being, just to minimize some of that risk if it does start hallucinating. And hallucinating, for those who don't know, is where it comes back with a wrong answer, really. It's convinced it's got a right answer, but it's a wrong answer. There's also the governance element of it. You know, if you're sending data to some of these models, they're a bit of a black box. You don't really know what they're doing and how they come back. You need to get reassurance that your data is not necessarily be used for training. So that's all a learning curve as well, right? There aren't AI governance experts necessarily available yet. It's a new market, so we have to go through all that. And the same for that adoption piece too. You can land this stuff, but there is still a bit of a kind of training around asking the right questions as part of that. So it's not difficult. Those 3 steps, I think it just needs a little bit of setting expectations early, agreeing where you really want to concentrate on, and then, slowly pushing that model out. So, how we're seeing it long term, is it there to disrupt the market as a whole? Unknown. Is it going to live up to the hype? Unknown. But for me personally, I've been doing this kind of data stuff for, I don't know, 12, 15 years now. When I think of other things, probably on a similar scale to this, we had data lakes, and then we had blockchain, we had kind of, RPA. I think this one just feels a slight different, just how easy it is to adopt, how relatively cheap it is to use, and yeah, how kind of widespread, I guess, visibility it's getting. So yeah, we're thinking longer term of whether it's going to shift our organization a lot, and it might just become terrifying people by saying this, the new Excel, right? Is it that everyone should have AI in the future, AI skills rather than Excel? So that's how we're thinking about it. Luke, can I hand it back to you?
Very good. Thanks, Sam. That was really interesting, and really look forward to hearing some more of your opinions and learnings in the panel session a bit later on. So I'm now going to hand over to Sam Spacey and Sameer to talk us through some of the use cases which exist for using AI within the building society sector.
Yeah, great. So I think a couple of things before I start going through these specific use cases here. I really want to echo what Sam just said about, some of the easiest and simplest use cases for AI as it exists at the minute is encouraging people to use these tools such as ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, etc. in their day-to-day work. So, for tasks like summarizing complicated regulation or documentation, it's absolutely fantastic at that kind of thing and can really help speed up people's work. It's just about encouraging people to use them effectively. And equally similar to what Sam just said as well, it's important to highlight that I think for each of these use cases, AI is not the selling point necessarily. The capability and success of the use case is not related to the specific implementation of AI. It's just the tool that's used to deliver the capability. The trend that we've seen towards descriptions like AI powered X and Y uses AI algorithms, it's important not to get caught up in the hype. Because while it's very exciting, as with any tools, the things that it's very good at and things that it's very bad at. But going through these use cases that we've picked out here specifically, so we've got, enhanced customer service, so using AI chatbots. They're really, really good at communicating with users on the fly, answering questions from a bank of data that is specific to your product. So you can use a technique called RAG or retrieval augmented generation, which allows them to draw from a specific data set that you've got, such as, a list of product information or FAQs to pull out information and narrow the focus specifically to stuff that customers want to know the answers to. For risk assessment and document verification, it's really good at understanding the context of documents. It can process information really efficiently more so than a human. And when it's trained to understand what it should be looking for, it can verify documents extremely rapidly. So for things like missing information or forgery, it can use pattern recognition to identify those things, which feeds into fraud prevention as well. So it's a really powerful use case. I think there's many examples of companies who are already using AI for fraud prevention. They can take in huge amounts of data, far more than a human could, and see changes in activity that could be similar to previous patterns they've got of confirmed fraud in other data sets. And with customer sentiment, large language models, for example, are really good at understanding human language. And given the volumes of data they've got on how humans speak and how we communicate, they're really good at understanding things like sentiment when trained on the appropriate data and pulling that out. The member segmentation piece is an interesting one, I think, for building societies very specifically, but recognizing member behavior, how strongly members align to each other, where they sort of group up in terms of behavior, lets you identify members that you might consider, ones who are sort of high value for the society, and how other members align to those groupings can allow you to sort of prioritize marketing, make sure you're marketing in the right ways. And then on the financial education, a good example of AI is the way it's used to personalize experiences. So using customer data and understanding what they're most concerned with or what they're most vulnerable to, and then offering them specific education around those things that can be completely personalized by AI. I think there's a lot of different companies who are doing work in that space at the minute. It's very exciting. Yeah, that's anything to add to that, Sameer?
I mean, nothing to add in terms of use cases. I think I'll give a different perspective from being a board member at the Bath Building Society. I think when AI is looked at the board table, normally within building societies, and I've been part of quite a few as a consultant and as a board member, then you have to cluster your mind into three things, and that's why most of the boards work. One is, does it improve productivity and internal efficiency and effectiveness? If it does, then show me the use case, which some of them we have highlighted already with the first two slides. Point two then is, will it help my member engagement, member communication, and getting me close to my members? Again, predictive member segmentation, personalized financial education, those sort of things fall into that bracket. And then number three, which is the case with every business, is, will it help me commercially and will it help me grow and scale? So all I will say is most of the use cases which Shawbrook has demonstrated and which Woodhurst have demonstrated fall into those clusters. If you're looking for to convince your board to justify the investment within AI for any use cases, make sure those are the clusters that you're thinking about. Or if you're thinking any other cluster, then you'll have to justify a little bit harder as to what. So the link to AI use case to outcomes in terms of member engagement, internal productivity, and growth and scale is absolutely crucial. So that's what I'll add to Sam's presentation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam and Sameer, for that. And that brings us on to the final topic before we launch into the roundtable. So, Chris, I think it's quite an interesting discussion topic, which we may get into in the panel around, do you set up your own internal AI function to build and develop your own tools? Or actually, do you buy tools off the shelf which might integrate with your core platform, which have AI already built into it? And especially for some of the smaller societies, the latter would seem to be the easiest approach. So really keen to hear how you have built AI into the docStribute platform across the last sort of 12 to 18 months. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. And thanks for everyone for joining today. So just to give a bit of background into docStribute, as I mentioned at the top of the call, our focus is to increase the engagement, the readership, and ultimately the understanding of regulated documents. Now, that obviously ties into the consumer duty. Sameer spoke about outcomes, improving outcomes and removing bad outcomes, and I'll unpack that a little bit later. And we do this, we distribute documents right across the sector. So to give you some context, we work with building societies, but we also work with tier 1 banks. And what we're seeing is that actually, when it comes to document distribution, there's 2 key regulations that impact their delivery. The first is this durable medium rule. For those of you that are familiar with the durable medium rule, and for those of you who are not, sorry, it's a regulation that requires that documents are distributed to customers in a way that they can't be changed. Now, of course, there's lots of digital ways in which we can send documents to customers, but each have some operational drawback or downside. And as a result, the industry has really landed in 2 places when it comes to documents. The first is that they either revert back to the use of paper, which is massively expensive and unsustainable, or they revert back, or they push documents through banking apps on mobile apps, essentially. Now, the trouble with banking apps is that nobody's actually reading the documents. In fact, we're seeing between 10 and 15% engagement across the industry. And the reason is twofold, really. The first is that they rely on a pull strategy. So you might get an email going, "Dear Chris, your document's ready to be viewed. Please log on to the banking app. Please find the documents folder. Please find the document we're referring to. Please click into that document and please read the documents." And obviously, in today's hyper-connected world, a digital strategy like that is never going to work. The second thing is that actually, when you get to the document, it's not very consumable. It's very difficult to understand. They're long. They're lots of complicated words and jargon. And so, and there might be 65 pages, and that's also a problem. So there's no real incentive to get to the document for the customer. Now, at docStribute, we handle the first part of that problem around engagement using distributed ledger technology. So we essentially, what we do is we create immutable hyperlinks that deliver documents in this durable medium. But what it does is it removes the friction so that documents can be easily accessed, and you click into the documents, and it's working. We're getting up to 92% engagement in some cases in terms of open rates of that document. But now that they're in the document, this is the important part. And this is where we see a massive opportunity for the use of AI. We're all familiar with chatbots. We're all familiar with conversational AI. But now we can start to use AI to interrogate those documents and ask questions. So you've got a 65-page mortgage terms and conditions on your mortgage policy. The customer can now go and ask, what happens if I default on that on a payment? And that can then navigate them to the section of the document, help them with the navigation first, and then explain exactly what might happen using that information in the document. So that's incredibly powerful. But I mentioned jargon as well. So you might have what is a compound interest. The customer might not know what that means. So you can hover over that section of the document, and we use AI to then help explain to the customer exactly what AI interest might be. Compound interest might be. So an explainer video or a talking head that might just pop up and explain that terminology to you. So that's really, really important. But beyond that, you can start to think about, once you've now helping with the understanding component, you can start to use the AI to take unstructured data and actually then feed it back into the organization. So start to think about, can we identify gaps in our communication? Are the same questions being asked time and time again? Where do we move those questions into our documents? If we know that a customer's only going to be in a document for, 30 seconds, it's really important that we give them the most important information at the start. So that's the first sort of use of AI. The second part of the AI is to increase that engagement and the open rates of those documents. So how do we think about using AI to hyper-personalize the messages that we're actually sending to the customers to get them to open those documents? So the tone of the email, I might be completely different in terms of my demographics in comparison to someone from another background. How do we personalize the messaging to that person and make it relevant to them so that they want to click into that document and open that document? And that might be simple things like changing the subject line, changing the tone of voice of the messaging and the SMS or the email. It might be changing the call to action in the button that you want to push. All of these things, AI can help us to identify and identify patterns and obviously improve that customer experience, which is what we want, and obviously improve those better outcomes, as Sameer mentioned. So that's just to start. Obviously, we're quite far in the journey on that in terms of delivering that to our customers. But obviously, it's not without challenges, and I'm sure we'll get onto some of those challenges and those questions a little bit later.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chris. So keen to move into the panel discussion, and please do post any questions which come to mind as they come up using the Q&A functionality. In terms of the initial question to get us started, I'm gonna direct it to yourself, Sameer, initially. So, are societies ready for AI? Obviously, we know that societies are largely, I mean, they are modernizing at the moment, but largely they are on legacy technology. So they're not on the most modern core banking platform or have the most modern digital front ends. So I'd be interested to get your view, certainly from the customer-facing standpoint, but also internally facing. Are societies ready to adopt AI?
So it's a very good question. Again, the answer is there are three crucial ingredients. One is, have they got the leadership, which is absolutely important. Two is, have they got the culture and literacy? Again, very important, unseen, unheard, underrated. Third is, again, to your point, Sam, have they got the skills, technical skills, and the infrastructure? So those three together give us the attribute of whether the societies are ready or not. In case of our case study, Bath, and I can talk you through Principality and others, which I've been close to as well. None of those three ticked the boxes, really. We were not culturally ready. We didn't have the right leadership to lead us in that journey. And we didn't have the technical skills and the culture and the processes. But from an executive team and a board perspective, we had the confidence that this not technology, but this transformation will help the society to grow and scale, and will be left behind if we don't invest in it. And the use cases were pretty strong. The outcomes they were driving was pretty strong for the members, for internal processes, to get internal efficiency, and for the building society to grow and scale. So we invested in threefold. We invested in a team, change management team, the technical team internally. We took partners on board like Woodhurst, and we took technology partners on board. And I was also recruited as a non-exec with my background in data and technology. So that was the approach. The confidence came in through a very strong. Now we've got in a place where we've got strong technical skills and resource, good partners, good leadership, which drives the culture and literacy across this table. So in direct answer, building societies may not be ready, but they can be ready, and they can be ready very quickly. I mean, we can only see, couple of examples, big and small ones. Nationwide, for example, obviously one of the biggest ones, has been actively using it for various use cases. I've worked with Yorkshire before in advisory capacity. They're using it for personalized product recommendations. For the smaller ones, apart from Bath, Newbury, and Vernon are using it. So I think it's a case of what is AI being used for? You have to start with a small use case and then grow and convert it into a transformation project, which helps achieve greater, bigger strategic outcomes. So yes, I think they are ready, and they could be ready.
Perfect. And Chris, anything to add on that from your dealings with the various mutuals?
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. I saw a question that's come in around hallucinations, and so I might just jump into that. But when you're looking to deploy the technology in a building site, or any institution for that matter, there are some risks involved in that. So how do we, for example, if someone's querying a document, how do we make sure that the responses that you're given first are factual, they actually meet the requirements, and how do we prevent that from hallucinating? Because there's a concern of trust, obviously, with AI, and it just sort of going, so this vision of it just going completely wild. So I think you need to be very clear in terms of setting what the guardrails are from an early start, being very clear in terms of what it is, what's acceptable, and putting those guardrails in place to make sure that you don't go beyond those or go outside of those. So I think you've just got to be very, very transparent about the capabilities, and that's the starting point, and then being very honest about in terms of what the risks are and how you've mitigated those risks, because you can mitigate them. There are many ways to do that. But yeah, so it's just setting the guardrails in the very beginning. I think is important.
Yeah. And I guess to build on what you both mentioned, Sameer, you mentioned culture being quite a key element. I guess Sam from Shawbrook, do you have any learnings from a cultural perspective around some of the things you put in place to really drive that, I guess, increased education and building that culture within the organization?
Yeah, we did. So I think to begin with, just having a kind of leaning in focus on communication is key. So very early on, when we start to see the emerging tools such as ChatGPT, we just set out a kind of holding note that we are looking at it. That there are governance concerns, like some of the guys have said. Please, don't go away and start throwing every piece of data you like into it. And that just kind of, I think, gave some reassurance that we're taking it seriously. I guess how we built on from there is we've kind of built a core working group across those important domains we spoke about. So Sameer touched on it very well with his points. Our leadership are very keen to look at this. So we very quickly brought in governance, compliance, infosec, technology, business together to kind of champion it together, and now we kind of federated out that champion model. Okay, so find those like-minded people out there, allow them to kind of have that first stab at giving it a go, and then employees will enable teams, and teams will enable your business. Is kind of the mindset we thought about that.
Makes sense. Very good. And Sam Spacey, I'm going to come over to you next for this question, and it's quite an interesting one. I spoke a little bit at the start around the regulator and the part that they play in, I guess, enabling financial institutions to adopt AI. What role do you think that the regulator should play in overseeing AI across the sector?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think with a lot of the emerging technologies that have come out recently, be it cryptocurrency and blockchain technologies and AI, the regulator is sort of rushed off their feet trying to account for these things as quickly as possible. I think the focus should definitely be on balancing that innovation and helping sort of foster that innovative culture with the protection of the consumer ultimately. So all of the oversight that the regulator has on this stuff should be focused around, transparency, making things fair and safe, particularly when we're talking about areas such as like lending and sort of credit assessment and stuff like that in the context of building societies. There needs to be more clear guidelines on how to handle data, as we've touched on already. Like, the way that data is processed within AI models isn't generally well understood. It's a black box, and where the data goes once you send it to an AI model, like there needs to be clear guidelines around that for the companies producing these things, along with accountability for some of the outputs of the algorithms as well. Like, so you have to ensure that people have a good understanding of what they're producing when they're using these topics. Yeah, but that is kind of balanced, I guess, with the not going sort of over the top with restriction. So there probably needs to be a consultative approach. Like, they need to be speaking to people in the industry to understand what the use cases are and sort of getting a better idea of how to refine the policies over time, rather than rushing in with sort of overzealous regulation.
And Sam, from the Shawbrook perspective, have you been in contact with the regulator? Have they provided you, I guess, any guidelines, or is it very much kind of like Consumer Duty in that you almost need to set the guardrails yourself?
Similar, and this isn't my field of expertise, Luke, so I'll try not to go into it too much, but we do just simply what we do. We do keep a model inventory, for example, of any AI we use, which is very clear around the guardrails that it's used for, that Chris touched upon, but also the ability for any external auditor or regulator to come in and see that model and be able to see the output that you would have got at various points in time. So there's some traditional tools you can do part of that with any kind of technology around source control and you know, backups and areas like that. But I think Sam touched upon it. I think it's more just about transparency, really. You know, I think it's such a new space. I think even the regulator, we're all playing catch up and trying to find a comfortable level between everyone at the moment. So, yeah.
No, makes sense. And Chris, I'll come over to you. I'm conscious that we've got a couple of questions coming in, so we can we can answer them as they come through. There was one from Oliver around what exactly are AI hallucinations in the context of building societies, and what can we do to at least keep them in mind and potentially mitigate them. I'm guessing that's something you've considered from the docStribute perspective as you've been building your solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the key things. If you think about it in general terms, there's sort of two key challenges that you've got. The first is what goes into the model. So to the point that the guys have just spoken about in terms of customer data, and you know, that customer data isn't shared and how you lock that customer data down. So that's the first bit, if you think about it. But then the second bit is what actually is spat out from the model, what actually comes out. And this is where you run the risk of hallucination. So if you think about it in the context of our solution, if you ask it, I use the example of what happens if I default on my mortgage? And the response is, well, maybe don't spend so much on entertainment. That is clearly a hallucination and doesn't relate exactly. And I exaggerate to obviously make the point. But how do you prevent those hallucinations? Well, again, it's prompt engineering. It's making sure that you fine tune the model. So the way that we deal, and the two problems that I mentioned in terms of what goes into the model and what comes out, they're both actually quite related, because in order to ensure customers' information, what we do is we actually localize an LLM, and we've just for those of your interest, we use Llama 3.2 because you can localize it and bring it into your own environment, and therefore you don't run the risk of pushing those documents cross border or put those documents up into the cloud. So that's the first problem. So now you've got the model localized. Now you want to start to ask it questions, and that might not necessarily be the up-to-date model as what's in the cloud. And so then that becomes a challenge in terms of how it responds and how it answers. And there's always new variations of that model coming out as well. So you've got to bear that in mind. So they represent the same sort of challenge. But the answer to your question is, how do we stop hallucinations in our spaces where you get an answer that is incorrect? The way that we do it is through essentially, as I said, prompt engineering. So making sure you can have decision trees that lead you down. That's sort of kind of old school, but you can still use decision trees. And then lastly, what we do is we fine tune, and you can turn the temperature up and down in terms of, you know, Sam mentioned RAG earlier. You can use those tools, RAG engineering as well, to help you make sure that the information you get is the most up-to-date information. But it's about testing, and it's about training, and it's about being very, very meticulous in how you go about those and setting the right temperatures in terms of the answers and the responses that you get. But it is absolutely 100% manageable, as you can see from all the chatbots that are being used today in the banking sector.
Very good. And the next topic I want to touch upon is probably quite a pertinent one for a lot of people on this call. People are going to be thinking about building the business case for an AI solution. Obviously, there's going to be investment required up front, and it can sometimes be tricky to quantify the benefits that you will get from such an upfront investment in technology such as AI, where it can be unclear what the end outcome or the end solution will be when you embark on the journey. So I'm quite keen to hear the thoughts from Sam in terms of what they do at Shawbrook, and also Sameer, when you see business cases come across your desk for board level funding, what are you looking for specifically in there which swings that lever between yes, we'll provide the investment, or no, we'll ask for further information? So I guess, Sam, from your perspective to kick off would be really useful, and then to hear the angle from Sameer.
Yeah, sure. So I guess usually in the data space or the AI space, and I think Sameer touched on this earlier, it really falls into four categories when we think about it. There's either going to be a cost saving by productivity gains. There's going to be a revenue uplift, for example, if you're going to, I don't know, boost your marketing campaigns. And I'll go into a bit more detail in a minute. I call it the get out of jail free card, right? There's some regulation piece that we have to get done, but probably the one we've found that sits best with our exec at the moment is around making better decisions, and in particular around that is how we onboard better quality loans onto our book. Okay, so we want to see less non-performing loans, less credit risk going out that side of it. That seems to have landed quite well. And how you quantify that is, or how you quantify any of that. So we overlaid our kind of organizational model in terms of technology spend, personal spend across many areas across the bank. The key domains: sales, finance, back office, HR, everything really, and then went and found use cases across the four. A lot of them, 80% of the time, were in that cost saving piece, right? We can, and just on use cases, a lot of this we need to think about in this space is much. I would always recommend going back to kind of first principles, because you don't need good systems anymore, right? These tools are very good at getting the data as it comes in, whether it's an email, a PDF, etc. So you can leapfrog a lot of the kind of traditional, I guess, challenges that we might have had to come across before. So if you go back to really understanding what the core business need or problem is, and then if you've got any service designers or traditional BAs that can go into that workflow, they're worth their weight in gold in this kind of stuff, because you can see you can drop particularly Gen AI in there, and your cost saving numbers can shoot up quite dramatically, changing or simplifying a process, not just by using technology of the way it's done now. Okay, so find those 4 small 1%ers, and then you'll be surprised as it aggregates up across the organization. You get some decent numbers.
And Sameer, your perspective when you've seen these business cases come across your desk, what are you looking for?
Yeah, the first thing I look at is alignment to the business strategy, the overall strategy, and how the use case aligns with that, both on a short term and a longer term. The other aspect to look at, is it practically feasible and can it be delivered? Again, the stuff that I mentioned, is it more of a far-fetched theory, or is it much more practical that can be delivered with credible and tangible outcomes? Those are the two main ones. I mean, obviously, all the others I've mentioned. The business strategy bit is quite critical. You can have a shiny new toy, and rather than having how it aligns to the strategy, you are shouting about a toy that particularly is useful, but useful in a tactical way. So the first thing we will always want is how does it improve outcomes? How does it align to the business strategy? The other way to look at it is, as a consultant, I guess, is what pain point does it solve, and what opportunity does it give me? And does it solve a very aching pain point that you face on a day-to-day basis within your teams? Or does it give you a very tangible market opportunity that you're looking to harness, and this particular technology or transformation can help you harness? So those are the kind of top level things I would first look at before going into the detail of the business case.
Makes sense. And then Sameer, I saw you answered one of the questions on the chat around, let's assume that the spend gets approved and you can actually implement an AI solution. What were the initial and ongoing challenges in terms of governance that people need to consider?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously, it's a very good question from William, I think, who asked the governance question. The governance is a huge issue. It has been a huge issue. AI has just exacerbated that issue, and the governance challenges come through right from data and what permissions, right through how you're deploying it, how you're using it, to how you are managing the communication on the back of that. So, I mean, the best way to deal with it is I've always set up with the want of a better word, either a steering group or a governance committee with a cross-departmental function, which is it has data people, it has people from functions such as operations, which are quite important, people from technology, data engineers who deal with the data at a core level. And then giving them a clear mandate on anything to do with governance or any questions around that, and the governance policies, the governance documentation, everything is managed through that. So that's kind of a centralized group that is formed as a part of various different functions together. What it does is really it gives, first of all, it gives the confidence in everybody, including the members of the building societies, that there is somebody who is taking ownership of that governance. Obviously, then the governance committee should report to an executive level leader, or it should have an executive leader within the committee who is attending that. So that gives another level of confidence that it's taken at a very top level. And then it has to have a clear mandate. If the governance committee recommends something to the executive team, which comes to the board, if in that case, then the board has to take it very seriously, and the board has to give the bandwidth and the airtime for the governance committee to feedback on the issues and risks that it highlights within the AI. So I would say definitely governance is a big issue. It has to be tackled head on, but it cannot be tackled by one person. It has to be tackled. It's an organization-wide issue, and multidisciplinary, multifunctional team as part of the steering committee is the best way to tackle governance issues.
And thanks, Sameer. And does that resonate, Sam, with what you've seen and set up within Shawbrook?
Yeah, exactly right. You need that cross-functional team and perspective on this, because there's so many dimensions to it, from everything from adverse media on some of these companies, right, to how are you going to send your data to them. Chris touched upon it. Hosting, a lot of them are US based, and that provides a whole different ball game, particularly in the financial sector. So yeah, get your InfoSec guys, your tech guys, your compliance, your governance in that kind of steering group, and meet often, right? We meet fortnightly to go through this stuff.
Great. I'm quite keen to get opinions on this. Obviously, within the building society sector, we've got some of the very large players, your nationwides, which obviously have adopted a lot of AI solutions already. But you go down to some of your smaller societies, the likes of your Penrith, for example, and Chorley and Beverley. Those two different sizes of organization need to adopt AI in quite different methods, in my opinion. So your real small players, it's probably advisable to partner with other vendors, or your core provider can integrate with potential AI solutions that you can take part in. There comes a point where you are of a size that you can have your own internal capacity and machine learning engineers, and you can build that capability in-house. I'm interested in, I guess, the thoughts of all of the panel as to where that point is across the sort of 43 societies. Is it, and we don't need to be so specific, but is it only the top 10 who should consider setting up their own AI in-house function, or actually can you do it with some of the smaller societies with slightly less assets under management?
I think from my perspective, you can kind of approach the problem similarly, but in slightly different ways across different societies. So the larger societies might have the resources to set up, dedicated teams that are involved in creating in-house AI solutions, or looking for vendors to partner with. The sort of, as you go down sort of towards the smaller societies, as Sam spoke about a little bit earlier, you will have people internally who either have a passion or a related skill set or the ability to learn, and can take these sort of responsibilities on as sort of an ad hoc basis to their existing role and champion those ideas within the society. Like, you don't need to build an entire suite of AI tools straight away. You could collaborate with fintechs and other vendors in the market. You could focus on some really niche use cases to do some process or optimization. You don't have to sort of focus on the the big ticket items straight away, and that can be a really valuable way to do it, quite a cost-effective way, I think.
Yeah, I would add to that, Sam. So again, the first thing you look at is an AI strategy rather than use. I mean, when an AI use case is written, obviously, what's the short term, what's the long term? Is irrespective of the maturity and the size of the society, is it looking to invest in it over a longer period of time? In which case, there is a point where an inflection point comes where you start off with, as Sam is suggesting, which I fully agree on, is you start off with various fintech small providers being your partners and collaboration and partnerships. And basically 80% of it is outsourced. You just provide the leadership and the guidance, and then you go from there. But if the strategy is an AI strategy is credibly written and has got very tangible outcomes and use cases, and it's a strategy over a longer period of time, then while that might be a tact to start with, but after 12 months, 18 months time, you need to take stock of the situation and you need to slightly morph it into a more hybrid team with more kind of 50-50 in terms of outsourcing, partnership, and also internal resource. But it's very contextual. It depends on every organization is different. Every organization's use case is different. Investment case is different. So it's very difficult to answer that question, but you definitely start off with outsourcing more.
Makes sense. Thank you. So I'm going to leave with one last question for each of you and put you on the spot here to peer into your crystal balls a little bit and predict what AI within, I guess, financial services in general, but you can pick the building society sector if you want, will look like in, say, 3 to 5 years' time. So will it have replaced everybody's roles? Will it be a flash in the pan and nobody's talking about it, or will it be somewhere in between? So I won't put anybody on the spot, but anybody who feels like they want to go first, please go first.
I'll go first if you like, Luke, because it's a really interesting question. It's a bit of a cop out. I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle, and I think that'll be kind of on the spectrum of regulations getting comfortable on what we can and can't use it for, as well as a kind of comfortable expectations from a commercial point of view, what we want to use it for as well. I think we use the term quite a lot at Shawbrook that we want to position it to kind of automate the mundane to empower the brain. Okay, we're not looking to replace colleagues with it. We're looking at to improve their performance by partnering with it. So, you know, I think it will be highly adopted, but I think it's only going to, you know, kind of position it as, imagine we all get an assistant as part of our day jobs. That's what it's going to be there for.
I completely. Sorry, go on, Chris. You go on first.
I was going to say I agree, and I just love that statement that you've got. Just automate the mundane to empower the brain. I think I might borrow that going forward, but I think it's absolutely right. Listen, AI is not going anywhere, right? It's very much here to stay. Is it going to mean that everyone's out of jobs? No, not in the short term, certainly. Where I think it's going in the financial services sector, from our perspective, the way we see it is, especially in the context of consumer duty, and as we look at consumer duty and the change and shift in culture, I think it's got a huge role to play in hyper-personalization. I genuinely believe that hyper-personalization is how we solve some of the issues with consumer duty in terms of our understanding of our products and services that we buy. So I'm just really excited to see what it brings. But no, I don't think we'll be out of jobs anytime soon.
Sameer?
Yeah, I'll just add, I agree with both Sam and Chris. I think related to personalization, I think where AI has been less used and should be used more is product development. I don't think many building societies have developed product based on analysis of customer behavior, analysis of the market, and analysis of competition thrown in together to develop what product suits their own businesses. Not many have done that. It's an underrated area. So I think in the future, innovation and product development led by AI will be a big thing. But that's just my prediction.
Perfect. And last but not least, Sam?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I agree with what everyone has said here. Like, I think it's only going to get bigger in the market over time. In the next 3 to 5 years, I think probably the biggest change that we're going to see is how much trust people put into AI tools. Like at the minute, I think there's still a little bit of skepticism, but I think this is the time where people are going to start, you know, embedding it more in their day-to-day lives and the work that they're doing as part of their jobs. You know, people will be growing up with AI, you know, in 3 to 5 years being the way that they've experienced their entire jobs. I think there's definitely going to be more and more tools coming out there, more fintechs that you can integrate in with even legacy systems that don't have AI capability. You know, those kind of things are going to become a much bigger consideration in the future.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. I'm aware we are on time. Thank you very much to everybody who was on the panel and who ran through the presentations. Hopefully that's been useful for everybody on the call. I think there's a huge opportunity in the sector to automate the mundane and power the brain, as Sam said. And if anybody who has listened does have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us directly, and we'd love to have a chat. We will be sharing the recording of this webinar in the next few days. So all that leaves is for me to say thank you very much to everybody who gave up their lunch hour to listen to us speak about AI. Thank you very much to the fellow presenters, and have a great rest of the afternoon and weekend when it arrives.
Thank you all. Thanks,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.